Hey there, true believers. Are your teeth feeling as gloomy as a supervillain's lair? Fear not, for here comes Excelsior toothpaste to save the day. Excelsior toothpaste gives your teeth the pow they need to fight off plaque and gingivitis. With its supercharged minty flavor and enamel-protecting formula, you'll be swinging into action with a smile that can stop crime. Holy fresh breath, Batman! Excelsior toothpaste not only fights cavities, but also leaves your breath as fresh as a spring breeze in Gotham City. It's the secret weapon every superhero needs in their utility belt. So grab your cape, fly over to your nearest store, and pick up Excelsior toothpaste today.
Welcome to this Moving Panels One Shot. Let's have a nerdy little conversation. And in honor of the 2024 Olympics, we are discussing the gold, silver, and bronze age of comics. For those of you who tuned in 2 weeks ago, we've already talked about the golden age, the age that really laid the groundwork for comics as we know them. And today we are looking at what some might call a transformative era as we talk about the silver age of comics. And once again, please welcome our co-host for this journey, Mr. Reece Fowler.
Hey, Laramy, thanks for having me, buddy. Appreciate that.
Hey, it's been a treat. Again, I know you're very interested in comic books and superhero stuff, and to have you kind of learn some of the history that you don't know has been fun. Did you enjoy our conversation on the Gold Age?
Absolutely. It was a really good conversation that we had. I did learn a lot, several things that I was not aware of, especially from that early era of the comics, the Golden Age, as you called it. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out what I don't know from the Silver Age.
Let's quiz you a little bit.
Okay.
So do you remember what created the Golden Age? Like, what is the beginning of the Golden Age?
Yeah, that was Superman.
That was Superman, Action Comics #1. Do you remember what ended, or about what time the Golden Age ended? Because that, of course, will be the beginning of our Silver Age.
So that was about the 1950s. I want to say, what, 53,
you are correct. Yep.
54?
Yep. Mid-50s is exactly when it happened. And do you remember what event I said kind of some people would say is what put it into it?
I want to say there was a war going on.
It was after the war.
Right after the war? Okay.
Yeah,
so that would have been some time after.
This would have happened around 54.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, before my before my age.
So if you remember, the last thing we talked about was the implementation of the Comics Code Authority.
Oh, yeah.
Where they had to put the restrictions because of the book Seduction of the Innocent.
Yeah.
Which made a lot of people think that comic books were causing the delinquency of the young.
Yes, I do recall you saying that now.
Yeah. So here we are, the Silver Age of comics, beginning in the mid-1950s, and it would stretch all the way to the early 1970s. And this is really a revitalization. If you remember, because of the comic code, we talked about that things were becoming a little bland. Superheroes were kind of dying out because of following the war. And so you had more war comics, horror comics, romance comics. Archie comics became a big thing around this time. But here we have kind of what's considered the revitalization of the comic book industry in the Silver Age. This is where a lot of creativity, I guess you could say this is where a lot of rebirth happened, especially with superheroes. We got the introduction of new characters. We got new versions of old characters. There was a lot of innovation in the storytelling. And of course, we move, which would then lead into the Bronze Age. We start moving into more complex and mature themes. And as they started to get away from the Comics Code Authority.
Okay.
So again, we had the end of World War II. That changed comics. The Comics Code Authority just had all these guidelines. But the thing was that comic book creators, they had to find ways to still push the boundaries, to explore all of these more mature themes. And again, they had to bring back the superhero. So let's talk it. We said that the introduction of Superman kicked off the Golden Age. So do you know which character, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, which character that many believe kicked off the Silver Age?
It would be a total guess, no matter what I throw out there.
So I'll give you a hint. It was a reintroduction it was a new version of a character that already existed. Now you're thinking this is the 1950s. So what kind of genre was starting to become big in the 1950s?
I'm not that old.
But yeah, but think about the 1950s into the 60s.
Can we bring back Batman?
No, Batman never went away. Remember, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are kind of the staples. Like there was really never a lull for the three of them.
Okay.
But there were characters that kind of disappeared. And this is a character that got I'll just go ahead and give you the genre, because this is a big, important genre of the Silver Age. Sci-fi was becoming a big thing.
Okay.
And so a lot of characters were getting more of a science fiction element to them. And this is a character that returned with a brand new version of this character. So it was not the same character, but it was the same superhero, I should say. So a different person being this superhero. And he had more of a science fiction origin now. Very popular character. 1956 is when this happens.
Oh, you're hurting my brain.
Okay.
Thinking really hard about, and again, it's going to be one of those, oh yeah, I should have known that. Because you got Doctor Strange.
It's a DC character. I'll give you that. Remember, the Marvel characters don't really start going until the 60s.
Okay. All right.
So this is 1956. And I'll give you the name of the comic. The comic was Showcase number 4. Like, that's going to help.
Yes, that really helped. Narrowed it down to...
Yeah. So in 1956, in Showcase number 4, Robert Kanigher and Carmine Infantino introduced Barry Allen as the Flash.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and this was a departure from the Golden Age because, like I said, it was a new beginning. It was very science fiction inspired for his redesign, because you have Barry Allen, the scientist who is in his laboratory, and a bolt of lightning comes through the window and hits him, and that, along with a bunch of chemicals getting mixed together, produces the fastest man alive, and we get the Flash.
Yep, got that super speed now.
And of course, that's completely different from Jay Garrick, who was the Flash of the Golden Age, who, I don't remember if we talked about this in the last episode, but he got his powers from inhaling hard water vapors during a smoke break.
No, we never talked about that, and I don't see how that would give you super speed.
Well, that's how it happened in the 40s. Jay Garrick became the Flash by inhaling hard water vapor during a smoke break. So, to all of our people listening, vaping could possibly give you superpowers, but
I doubt that it will work. But there will be some people trying it.
Who believe? Yeah, vaping is bad. All right. So again, this made it a little bit more relatable, because we've got, in the 50s, you got sci-fi becoming a big thing. Of course, once Kennedy becomes president, we got the push of getting to the moon.
Correct.
And so all of that heading into the 60s. And this led to a wave of reimagining some Golden Age heroes into entirely new ones. I mean, characters were given more of a modern makeover. You had also Green Lantern. So if you remember, just like with the Flash, there was another Green Lantern in the Golden Age, Alan Scott. Right. And he just finds a lantern that was crafted from a meteor. So he already had kind of a sci-fi twist. And it showed him how to construct this ring from the rock that was inside the lantern, but it wasn't considered science fiction. It was more just considered magic.
Okay.
All of his stuff. Now we have Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern most people are familiar with, and his ring comes from an alien source, and makes him part of this alien intergalactic police force, as you will. So again, more of a sci-fi element. Aquaman also got this. Aquaman went from just being a human who was raised in an underwater facility built by his undersea explorer dad, and he just learns how to talk to fish. Okay. So there was no super power really associated. It was more he just learned how to talk to fish,
because there's so many people out there speaking fish and can teach you how to do that.
And then also his ability to breathe underwater was just because since he lived underwater, he eventually could hold his breath for over an hour. Again, couldn't actually breathe underwater, but he could hold his breath for longer than humanly possible, really. But of course now Aquaman gets he's half Atlantean. His dad's a human, his mom's an Atlantean, and then he is born, and so we get that. Hawkman
makes a whole lot more sense that way.
Yep.
Okay,
Hawkman becomes an alien. Originally, the story of Hawkman was that he was just a reincarnated version of an Egyptian prince.
Okay,
but they completely changed that and made him a Thanagarian, made him an alien, and so we get all these kind of sci-fi things. We also start getting the team-ups that everybody loves. So we get the Justice League of America.
Yep.
That happens during the Silver Age. The Golden Age, of course, had the Justice Society, but they were just a group. They weren't individuals. Justice League, of course, are the individual characters who team up to form the group. And this is also where DC starts to experiment with their multiverse. So they do eventually bring back Jay Garrick and Alan Scott, but they instead say that they are from another Earth.
Okay.
And so that way they can still exist in the DC universe, but they're just in a different universe as we have it. This is also the time that Marvel Comics starts becoming a thing, as we've mentioned. Marvel, who was still known as Timely Comics at the time, but there was a revolution brewing around here. And in 1961, responding to the success of Justice League, famous, iconic Stan Lee and Jack Kirby introduced the world to Marvel's first team. Do you know who that was?
Well, Iron Man is very popular, but probably not the one.
I will tell you it's not the Avengers. Okay. So they are considered Marvel's first blank of comics. I don't want to say what the blank is because it kind of gives it away. But they are a team.
Okay.
And this is what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby decided to do. Hey, Justice League is hitting bid with DC. We're going to create a team. We're going to do it a little different. And so we are going to introduce the world. And again, sci-fi origin. They have a space kind of origin.
Right.
They went to space.
Could it be the Fantastic Four?
It is the Fantastic Four. So again, they also come in with this science fiction style origin. And unlike previous superheroes, the Fantastic Four were a family.
Yes. I
mean, Ben Grimm is probably the only one that's not officially related, but it was still a family. And the other thing about the Fantastic Four is they didn't have secret identities. Like everyone knew, even though they had superhero names, everyone knew Mr. Fantastic was Reed Richards.
Right.
Everyone knew that the Human Torch was Johnny Storm. But I will say that, and so Fantastic Four, of course, huge. But it's not just because they were a dysfunctional family. It's not just because they didn't have secret identities. That wasn't what made them successful. Can you think about what it is about the Fantastic Four that made them such a groundbreaking series?
Only thing that comes to mind is maybe their flaws were also shown as.
That's almost exactly it. Yeah. I mean they
are only human.
Yeah. I mean they presented superheroes as real people with real problems.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't just an alien who came to Earth and had all of these superpowers. They weren't a Greek goddess who has all of these powers. They weren't just a billionaire who decides to to cosplay and fight crime.
Right.
They were real people with real powers. They had arguments. They had personal struggles. I mean, all the stuff they do with Ben Grimm, with the fact that he's now this giant rock monster, and he's the other three of the members can still look human and be human, but he can't. Yeah, and of course dealing with just human vulnerabilities, and so it added depth, it added relatability. I was
just going to say they can, people can now relate to that character because hey, I'm experiencing the same things.
Yeah, and this is exactly what what would make Marvel the revolution that would be Marvel Comics. This is the type of characters they would bring in. Is making characters that, like you said, are more relatable, that the characters are more human. The stories then would become more engaging. And that is primarily the work of Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko, who are just icons in the business. Let me ask, can you think of the other characters in Marvel? And this shouldn't be too hard because they're such iconic characters. What other characters that Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko created at this time during the Silver Age?
I'm thinking Iron Man had to be in there somewhere.
Iron Man is in there, absolutely.
Captain Marvel?
Nope, Captain Marvel wasn't around. Wasn't one of theirs from this time.
Okay. How about Hawkeye?
Nope. Think bigger. Think main Marvel characters.
I would need more hints. I don't want to waste too much time thinking about this.
So think about think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about characters that dealt with more personal issues. So first off, you have let's just hit the big one first. Let's talk about a superhero that has to deal with being a young adult. What superhero would have to... Spider-Man.
Yep.
You got Spider-Man.
Yep, that eluded me.
Think about a superhero that has to deal with the fact that he doesn't really want to be a superhero, but he can't help it, dealing with a little bit of a split personality.
Oh, why?
Don't make him angry.
Oh, Hulk. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the Hulk. I mean, yeah, more relatable with... again, you got Bruce Banner, doesn't really want to be a superhero, but when he is the Hulk, he is a superhero.
Yes. And
then think about let's talk about a team here. Think about a team that is having to deal with, hatred against them because of how different they are. And they also don't have choices about being heroes because they're born that way. They didn't acquire their powers. They were born with their powers. And they have to deal with
Wolverine.
Yeah, the X-Men.
Okay.
And yeah,
all the X-Men.
Pretty much all the X. Yeah, pretty much. Again, you're looking at all these different characters that depict. All these characters had flaws. They had insecurities.
Right.
They dealt with personal dilemmas when it came to being a superhero. And again, these are the things that made these comics and these characters more relatable and really connected, which is what I will always say Marvel does better than DC. As much as of a DC fan as I am, Marvel does do the more relatability, especially at this time. Because you're looking at the 60s in DC was when things were getting a little silly, a little goofy.
Yeah.
Of course, you've got the Adam West Batman that would come in the 60s.
Loved Adam West Batman.
I'm not saying anything against it. I'm just saying, it's a little bit more... silly.
It was.
Yeah, it's not as relatable than you would get in the 70s. Of course, this would be heading into the Bronze Age, but into the 70s, you'd get the Incredible Hulk TV show, which was definitely more of a dramatic show than, let's say, the Linda Carter Wonder Woman television show.
I would agree with that.
So again, Marvel was very good at this. Again, we got the the science fiction elements of stories that were becoming more prominent. Space exploration, technological advancements, thus, characters like Iron Man. But then we also had to deal with the social issues, as we just kind of alluded to with the X-Men. So now we're into the 60s. And here's another question for you. How do you think the social and political climate of the 60s influenced the comics during the Silver Age?
Well, that was a lot of segregation in the 60s that people were having to deal with. Now we're going to a period of time where you're integrating people into the society that at one point didn't have much integration. I mean, it's like you're now...
Yeah.
The segregation is over. You're starting to put everyone together in the same situations. Now, again,
yes, but not without resistance.
Yeah, there was a lot of resistance going on there. I agree. But yeah, we're growing as a society. We're having to learn how to live in and work with people that we had not once lived and worked with.
So yeah, you had the X-Men that are dealing with prejudice, discrimination, which of course is mirroring all of that. Anything else you can think of that happened around the 60s that could have caused some of this change? We talked about the Golden Age was highly influenced by World War II.
Right.
So we're now in the 60s.
I'm trying to think, history eludes me there. It wasn't the Korean War. That was the late 50s, wasn't it?
Korean War was in the 50s,
right.
yeah.
And
so we're out of the Korean War, which kind of will start some of this. I'll go ahead and talk about this. So the Korean War kind of started, the fact of why were we involved, and leading that, essentially there was this counterculture movement that is happening here in the 60s, which then would play a bigger factor as we then lead into our next war,
Vietnam.
Which, of course,
I thought that was, I guess it was late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, as we start, as it all kind of starts going. So yeah, we've got the civil rights movement, we've got the counterculture movement, we've got Vietnam. All of those, of course, playing a factor. But I mean, even simple things. Spider-Man being a student, he's having to deal with bullying. I mean, you got the character of Flash Thompson, who is just a bully to Peter Parker.
Right.
Something that we hadn't really seen in comics before. Or even the J. Jonah Jameson stuff, that not only is he a bully of a boss, but the struggle that Peter Parker had to deal with to just financially survive, to get paid for his work. Which, again, like I said, plays into some of the counterculture idea that, the hippie movement, as well as we can talk about some of that. But this also, all of this stuff, the counterculture especially, led to our villains becoming a little bit more complex. We've got characters like Lex Luthor for Superman, Doctor Doom for the Fantastic Four. I just talked about Spider-Man, so we got Green Goblin, where they become more, multi-leveled, multifaceted adversaries that get a lot more elaborate backgrounds and motivations. Of course, you've got Doctor Doom, who is just power hungry, and you've got Lex Luthor, who starts off as a mad scientist, kind of, and then he transitions more into the business side of things. And then Green Goblin has that more of a scientific-based element. And so it added a lot more depth to the conflicts that the heroes are engaging with. I mean, you even look at Magneto. Go back and talk about civil rights kind of movement. As much as the X-Men are a metaphor for the civil rights movement, you also have Magneto there as a Holocaust survivor.
Correct. Who
is essentially fighting the same battle that the X-Men is fighting when it comes to prejudice, but he is seeing it from a different perspective.
Yeah, he's doing his work a different way, for sure. I think even at one time, didn't he and Professor Xavier, weren't they working together?
Yeah, they've established that the two of them were friends in the past. They've gone back and told those stories. And there's been a lot of comparison that Professor X and Magneto were essentially a representation of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Oh, okay.
Two men who were fighting for the same thing, just from two different sides.
Yeah, going about it a different way.
I wouldn't say sides, but yeah, going about it. Yeah, that's better. Going about it in a different way. So yeah, it was definitely a big change. The Silver Age really it established what would now be more of the way that modern comic books told stories. The Golden Age may have established comic books, but they didn't really become as deep in their storytelling. It was just the villain of the issue, right, or the conflict that they had to resolve. Now we start getting into really like storytelling. There's a bigger arc to our heroes. Even if they are just facing one bad guy per issue, there's still this bigger story that's being told. So we got characters, we got narratives that really become a huge part of what we now associate with comic books. And it's that would set the stage for the Bronze Age, that we would get this more mature, more diverse storytelling. And it doesn't sound like there's, when while we're talking about it, it doesn't sound like there's an awful lot to the Silver Age, but there really was. And it's just so much, as we're talking about depth, it is so much to go into depth about.
Yeah, I think it's the complexity of the issues that began to really start to show. Instead of, here's the good guy, here's the bad guy, you started developing more of why is this a good guy and why is this a bad guy, and what's
because I'll even go back to Magneto on that. I mean, there are people who will go, I kind of understand Magneto's point of view.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can relate. He saw the injustice. He was trying to go about fixing that in his own way.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about on this show several times about the sympathetic villains, and it was really around this time that we start getting introduced to those sympathetic villains. I mean, the villains of the Golden Age were pretty, straightforward. They are villains.
They're just
They are bad guys. Yeah. Whereas now we're bad guys, but we have a reason why we're bad guys. We have a belief that we are following, and it might make us a bad guy to some. And some of these villains did not think they were the bad guy. And again, it gets into that complexity. But we'll go ahead and end it here. That's the Silver Age. Again, a lot more innovation with comic books. But again, a transformation was starting to happen here that would cause a lasting impact. And again, whether you're a lifelong fan or whether you're new to the world of comic books, you have to understand that this is why the Silver Age is such a pivotal point, because it is the era that began to shape the stories and the characters that we have today. Again, we're introduced to a bunch of stuff in the Golden Age, but then in the Silver Age, we start to actually, again, transform and develop these characters. But thank you, Reece, for sitting through another history lesson on one of the important eras of comics.
You're welcome, Laramy. I'm glad I could be here and enlarge my knowledge of the Silver Age.
And thank you everyone for listening and tuning in. Rate and review the show, and stay tuned. We still got one more one shot on the Bronze Age of comics, but for today we'll wrap things up. For Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.